The year was 1941. The Eastern Front stretched like a festering wound across Europe. Towns smoldered, villages were emptied, and the sky seemed darker than it had before the war. For Corporal Heinrich Weiss and his platoon of 12 men, war had become routine. Mud, hunger, and the constant stench of death. They had seen cities burn, had watched the living stripped of everything, and had learned to stop questioning orders. But nothing had prepared them for the village.
It was late October when they stumbled across it. The forest road was narrow, overhung by twisted birches that clawed the air like blackened fingers. The air smelled of damp leaves and rot. The men had been marching for hours when Sergeant Mueller, their leader, raised his hand. "There," he said. Beyond the thinning trees, the village appeared. Stone cottages with thatched roofs, crooked fences, a small chapel at the center with its steeple cracked in half. At first, the men felt relief, shelter, firewood, maybe even food. But as they marched closer, that relief turned to unease. The silence was wrong. Villages always had sounds, dogs barking, chickens scratching, children running. But here, only the wind moved, rattling shutters against broken windows. Doors swung open, as if waiting. No smoke rose from chimneys, though the air was biting cold. "Abandoned," muttered Private Kruger, spitting into the mud. "Or hiding," Mueller replied. His eyes swept the houses. "Check your rifles. Weiss, take Schmidt, search the chapel." Weiss nodded, though his stomach twisted. The chapel door creaked as they pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Pews lay overturned, hymn books scattered across the floor. A crude cross still hung above the altar, but something had scratched deep gouges into the wood beneath it. Schmidt ran his hand over the marks. "Looks like claws," he whispered. Weiss shivered. "Or knives." They left quickly. Outside, the others were gathering near the village square. In its center stood an old stone well, the kind that had drawn water for centuries. Its wooden cover was gone, leaving only a gaping black hole. The men peered into it, but the darkness seemed endless. Sergeant Mueller frowned. "Set up camp here. We'll stay the night." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the soldiers, but none dared challenge him. They were exhausted, their boots soaked, their bellies empty, and though the village reeked of something unnatural, it was still shelter. Weiss dropped his pack near a broken cart and stared at the well. He could swear he felt air moving from its depths, cold, damp, almost like breath. They built fires in the square. The flames cast long shadows against the cottages, making the empty windows look like gaping eyes. Rations were thin, so they boiled potatoes scavenged from a cellar and passed around a flask of schnapps. The men tried to laugh, to tell dirty jokes, but their voices sounded brittle. Private Adler, the youngest, kept glancing at the well. "Feels like it's watching us," he muttered. "Shut up," growled Mueller, but he too avoided looking at it. By midnight, most of the men had crawled into their blankets. Weiss was on first watch, sitting with his rifle across his knees. The fire burned low, and the wind hissed through broken shutters. That was when he heard it. A whisper. He froze, every muscle tight. The sound was faint, almost drowned by the wind, but it was there. Words in a language he didn't understand, drifting from the direction of the well. Weiss stood slowly, rifle raised. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the whisper, low and constant, like breath pressed into words. He stepped closer to the well. The air around it felt colder, biting into his skin. Peering over the edge, he saw nothing but blackness. Yet the whisper grew louder, curling up from the depths. Then movement. Something pale shifted far below, like a hand brushing against stone. Weiss staggered back, heart pounding.
He blinked, and the darkness was still, empty. "Corporal?" It was Adler, crawling from his blanket. His eyes were wide, frightened. "Did you hear it too?" Weiss didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on his rifle and stared at the well until dawn bled across the sky. By morning, the men were restless. None admitted to bad dreams, but their faces told another story. Eyes shadowed, jaws tight, movements sluggish. The firewood pile was nearly gone, and mist clung stubbornly to the square. Sergeant Mueller barked orders to keep them busy. "Schmidt, Kruger, check the houses on the north side. Adler, you and Weiss, see if you can find the root cellar. The rest of you, fortify the square." Weiss and Adler obeyed, though both glanced at the well as they passed. The whispers had faded with the sunrise, but the air around it still felt heavier. They searched the cottages, most stripped bare. Empty cupboards, broken furniture, ashes long cold. But in one cellar they found jars of pickled vegetables, dusty but sealed. Food was food. Weiss carried the jars back up the cellar steps. At the doorway, he froze. The square was empty. Fires smoldered. Rifles leaned against carts, but no men. "Where the hell?" Adler began, but his voice trailed off. From the direction of the chapel came a muffled shout, then silence. Weiss and Adler exchanged a glance and ran. Inside the chapel, the air reeked of mold. In the aisle lay Private Kruger's helmet, dented, a smear of fresh blood along its rim. But Kruger himself was gone. "Kruger!" Adler shouted, voice cracking. The sound bounced off the stone walls, came back hollow. Weiss's skin crawled. "We need to find Mueller, now." They sprinted back to the square. This time men were there, Mueller, Schmidt, and 2 others, but Kruger was not among them. Weiss thrust the bloodied helmet into Mueller's hands. We heard him scream, in the chapel. Mueller's face hardened. He snapped orders sending Schmidt and Adler to search the chapel again. The others spread out through the village. Weiss stayed near the well, unease twisting his gut. Minutes dragged. Then Schmidt returned alone, pale, shaking his head. "No sign, not a drop of blood after the helmet. He just vanished." The men muttered, crossing themselves, spitting into the dirt. One whispered the word, "Hex, witch." Mueller silenced them with a glare. "He's hiding, or he ran, that's all." But Weiss noticed Mueller's hand tighten around his rifle, the skin of his knuckles bone white. They doubled the watch that night. Weiss and Adler shared a post near the well, though neither wanted to. The mist thickened, curling like smoke between the cottages. The firelight barely held it back. Adler hunched in his blanket, rifle across his lap. "Kruger didn't just walk off, you know that." Weiss said nothing. The silence deepened. Then footsteps. Both men jerked upright. The sound was clear, heavy boots moving across cobblestones. From the mist at the far end of the square, a figure emerged. Kruger, or something that looked like him. He staggered toward them, face shadowed by his helmet. His uniform was torn, damp with dark stains. His eyes glinted oddly in the firelight, too bright, too fixed. "Kruger?" Adler whispered. The figure didn't answer. It stopped at the well, turned its head slowly, and stared down into the blackness. Weiss raised his rifle. "Kruger, say something!" The figure lifted its head, its mouth opened. The voice that came out was not Kruger's. It was layered, hollow, like many voices speaking at once, words in that same unknown language Weiss had heard the night before. Then the figure stepped onto the lip of the well and dropped silently into the dark. Adler screamed. The others came running, rifles ready, but there was nothing to shoot.
Only the empty well, whispering louder than ever.
After the thing that wore Kruger's face vanished into the well, the men refused to go near it. Even Sergeant Mueller, who barked orders louder than his courage, avoided the circle of stones. They dragged carts to block it, stacked timbers across, as if wood and iron could hold back whatever lived below. But the whispers never stopped. If anything, they grew louder, scraping at the edges of thought, bleeding into dreams until sleep was no refuge. By the third night, no one had slept more than an hour. Their eyes were bloodshot, movements sluggish, tempers flaring at the smallest slight. That evening, Private Weiss found Adler crouched near the chapel, muttering. His nails were torn bloody where he had clawed at the stones. "They want us down there," Adler whispered, staring past Weiss as though seeing something far away. "Not to kill us, to show us." Weiss grabbed his shoulders. "Snap out of it! You sound like—" A scream cut him off. It came from the square. They ran back, rifles ready. The mist seemed thicker, swirling violently as though stirred by unseen hands. At the center of the square, the barricade over the well shuddered. Something below was pushing, straining. The timbers cracked, iron bands groaned. Mueller and two others rushed forward, trying to brace it. "Help me hold it!" But Weiss hung back. The whispers surged now, no longer faint, but deafening. A chorus of countless voices pouring into his skull. He clutched his head, staggering. The barricade split. From the gap rose a stench of rot and damp earth. A hand reached out, if it was a hand. Long fingers, jointed wrong, nails like shards of obsidian. It clutched the stones and heaved. The soldiers fired. Muzzle flashes tore the mist, bullets ricocheted off stone, but the thing kept climbing. A head emerged, too long, too narrow. The skin stretched thin like parchment. Its mouth opened wider than a man's should, and the voices poured out in unison, some German, some Russian, some languages none of them had ever heard. One soldier dropped his rifle and ran into the mist. Another kept firing until the thing's clawed arm hooked his chest and yanked him screaming into the black below. Mueller bellowed, face twisted with rage and fear. He hurled a grenade into the well. The explosion thundered, shaking the earth, silencing the voices for a heartbeat. Then the mist rushed outward like a living thing, sweeping through the square, extinguishing the fires. In that suffocating darkness, Weiss felt hands brushing past him, dozens, maybe hundreds. He fired blindly, then realized Adler was gone. When the mist thinned at last, the square lay in ruins. The barricade was shattered, the well gaped wide, silent, as though nothing had ever stirred within it. Only 4 men remained. Mueller, Weiss, Schmidt, and one other. Adler, Kruger, and the rest were gone. Weiss sank to his knees, shivering. He could still hear faint whispers beneath the silence, calling his name from the dark. Mueller's voice cracked like a whip. "We're leaving. At dawn we march. If the dead want this place, they can keep it." But Weiss knew the truth. The village would not let them leave.